If you guys are watching this, then it means that I am dead. I'm just playing. I always wanted to say that on camera. All right, so really quick, let me show you guys. It's parked here. All right, so I am in the middle of getting Judith ready for a dyno session. So as some of you would have already known, that I'm taking Judas my E50 BMW with an SR20 DE swap, DT, DE plus turbo, so DET. So I'm taking it to the dyno tomorrow. So I just wanted to cover all what I have to do and the stuff that you guys probably would need to do to get a car ready for a dyno session. So I usually always send that video to most guys before we do a remote tuning session, be it street or dyno, stuff to get ready. So the long and short of it, like what I like to say is taking a car to a dyno, you should afford the same amount of preparation for that as you would with taking a car to a racetrack. So basically you pack everything that you think will break, can break, and you think you might need a spare of, short of an engine or a gearbox. So what I like to tell folks is first things first, make sure you go over your car, everything, wiring, electrical, mechanical, everything is secure, tight, and nothing is loose. Then you carry some extra fluids. It helps to carry an extra quart or two of oil, coolant, because you never know, you might have to, something might go wrong with your cooling system and you might be short of some coolant, oil. It helps to have a fresh set of plugs in the car, and it also helps to have a spare set in addition to the fresh set in the car that's properly gapped. So whatever heat range you're using, in my case I have some 6s, NGK BKR6, but for the dyno I'm going to be doing or throwing on a set of BKR7Es. And that's pretty much all you really need to get to it. And if you have a base tune, make sure your car starts, runs, and everything. You don't want a car there and it has other issues and you're not even sure what is wrong with the car and you take it to that. It's a waste of everybody's time. So in addition to that, if your car has a base tune, if you can go ahead and sync your timing and set fuel pressure and all of that stuff. It helps a lot and it saves some time. So, but in my case, my car, BMW, again, our SR20 DE swap. So it's a NA SR20 engine, but it has a SR20 DET head. I don't think there's much difference between the head casting, but it has GSC cams, stage 1 cams, and springs, retainers, and all of that. And in the bottom end, it's pretty much a stock bottom end, a stock NA bottom end, with the exception of it has manly rods. So on the outside it has some Teachworks side fed 550cc injectors, max speeding rods, a 51mm T3 T4 turbo, and that's about it. So my goal tomorrow is just to do a shakedown pass with the car. So what I want to do is I want to see how much it's actually, with the street tuning that I've done, very conservative, I just want to see how much it actually is putting out. I think that's around 7.5 pounds, and I may turn it up a little bit on the dyno, probably turn it up to about 15 pounds, give or take, to see where it crosses. As for an actual number, anything above 300 to the wheel is going to make me a happy camper. I think I mentioned in the previous video that I'm not doing this for the numbers, but if I had to say a number, I would say about 300, which should be a fairly conservative goal. Anything above that is icing on the cake. The car is going to be running on 93 octane, but I do have my water meth kit, which did spring a leak now, and I'm doing some really backyard stuff to get it to stop leaking, because I cannot get the fittings locally. But in addition to that, what I really wanted to talk about is how folks get wrapped up in dyno numbers, and everyone always has a number in mind. This may come back and haunt me at the end of the video, well, at the end of the next video, because I have no idea how this is going to go. Hopefully smooth, but I think YouTube, the internet, Facebook, and I guess influencers in the motorsport community has pretty much messed it up for everyone. Everyone now is building a 1,000 wheel horsepower XYZ, 1,000 horsepower Corvette, 1,000 horsepower Supra, Subaru, everything. So that has become the new normal, the new goal for everyone. Everyone wants to build a 1,000 horsepower something. in reality, most folks will never be able to build or afford to build a 1,000 horsepower car. My theory is that, my personal theory is that, even if you can afford to build something once, if you can only afford to pay for the parts once, then you cannot afford to build that race car. What I mean by that is, I have seen over the years countless guys take every single dime they had, and some they did not have, they would have to borrow and whatnot, and they built a car. So they set a goal, say 800 or 1,000 horsepower, that is the goal. And it took them a few years. But then there's this local saying that babies are born dead. What I mean by that is, you can buy everything brand new, everything, valves, springs, pistons, turbo, and then you may still have one part that just fails randomly. Broken valve spring or whatever, some mistake or maybe just a factory fault, and you lose your entire setup. So at that point, what do you do when you just spend the last 5 or 7 years building something that you could not afford? You cannot afford it because it took you 7 years to save up for it, as opposed to having lower expectations and being a bit more realistic. What I mean by being realistic is that you want a street car. Let's pick a popular chassis, say a pick a car. Let's say a Subaru. Subaru is always fine because I'm actually sitting in my Subaru now. Say you have a street car, use it for work every single day, but you want to do a build. Fine, cool, it's normal. But you have a goal of, say you have a WRX, for instance, or let's just call it STI, and then you have a goal of 1,000 wheel horsepower or 800 horsepower. Realistically, that car is going to suck as a street car. You can have a race car that actually drives on the street, but in my opinion, that's just a streetable car. It's not a street car, because you have to compromise so much. The size of the turbo is going to be very laggy for the street, so it's not going to be fun unless you're just doing highway pulls alone. And then when you take a car that came out of the factory with 250 to 300 horsepower at the crank, and then now you're trying to go for 1,200 at the engine, it's almost never going to be reliable. Almost never happens. Every single pass the car, it's pretty much it's on borrowed time. You only have a certain number of runs with these cars. So I believe a lot of folks get decent, and I like to consider myself a hobbyist when it comes to YouTubing, but I always like to set realistic expectations for myself and for my customers, especially with me now tuning for a profession. I always say that tuning is actually more so of tuning and managing my customers' expectations rather than actually tuning the car. Because a lot of folks, it's their first build or maybe the second, and they come in with unrealistic expectations, like we speak about. They want 500 horsepower, truth and in fact, but they on a bone stock, let's say a Miata. Even if you build the engine, 500 wheel horsepower in a street car that weighs what, 2,500 pounds is pretty much going to be useless unless you actually drag race that car. So it's at that point it becomes, what are you actually building it for? Are you building it because the internet says that in order for you to be cool you have to have 800 horsepower or 1,000 horsepower? Or are you building it for what you want to drive? And another thing, it used to tick me off when I used to hear guys say, oh, I want a 1,000 horsepower build. And I was like, that's just BS. You're never going to do that. But in my mind, then it took me a few years for me to understand that sometimes when someone says that they actually want a 1,000 horsepower, that's their way of saying that they want a scary fast car. So they equate 1,000 to a scary fast car. So it's something to also bear in mind, the flip side of the coin. So when someone says I want a 1,000 horsepower car, Subaru for instance, what they're saying is that they want a car that's really fast, but they probably have never driven a 400 horsepower car or 500 or 600 horsepower car. So by the time you put them in a car that has 400 or 500 horsepower car, because they're probably driving around with 250 or so wheel horsepower car, then the conversation totally changes. Like, wow, I don't need any more. So that's taking everything with a grain of salt. So I'm heading to the dyno. Just wanted to speak about that. I think it's a conversation that more folks need to have. YouTube again is spoiling for everyone. You do not need 1,000 horsepower to be happy with your car. I dare say most cars that weigh under, let's say under 3,000 pounds, most of our sport compact cars anyways, you have anywhere from about 300, 250 to 300 wheel. That car is probably going to run easily in the 14-second quarter mile range, and that is going to be a scary fast car. So it just takes something, it's just something to think about when you hear numbers being thrown about. But anyways, less lecturing. Hopefully I'll get this video out tomorrow, Wednesday, and by that time I'll probably be on the dyno when I put the video out. Not gonna be editing it, but I also don't want to put it out tonight because I'm going to the dyno, and I really don't like when the crowds come to the dyno and you have 1,000 people, just because it's live on a very small island and you have 1,000 people watching, and I don't know, I'm a very private person, so I'll probably release this video tomorrow night. By that time I'll probably be on the dyno anyways, so yeah, that's gonna wrap it up. So quick talk, it's 11 minutes, so peace.